So to close this series off, a last thing that is optional but interesting is to weave documents. In literate programming, you can either tangle into source code, or you can weave into documentation, or you can leave the literate program as it is. So what we have here in this file, this is an org file, so that's a literate program which contains both the code and the documentation. But if we just want the documentation, we can render the org mode files in many different formats. Now, the rendering command to render, use Control-C, Control-E. And this is the key. Actually, I don't remember what kind of what the function is called, but we can look that up, of course. It's the function org export dispatch. And so if I type that on this buffer is sort of actually part of a larger file, but I've narrowed it. You can narrow the buffer. You actually can see this is a much bigger file. I'm narrowing the buffer. So the rendering command will only apply to the buffer that's visible at the moment. So I type Control-C, Control-E, and a menu opens, and that is the org export dispatcher, which allows a lot of different possibilities, only some of which I use. So it allows export to iCalendar, to HTML, as a buffer, as a file, to LaTeX, to ODT, to plain text, and so on. And you can also export to Markdown. I'm going to show all of these. So I'm going to start with Markdown because it's not in the menu. So if you type the very first time you open Emacs, you go MX, so Alt-X, org, export. And if you complete that with tab, you see all the different possibilities, export to LaTeX, Markdown, and so on. And some of these are not in the dispatch list. I don't actually know why at the moment. For example, there is an org LaTeX export to PDF. And this requires a special program, which I don't have on my Windows box. There's also a export to tech info, which also requires a program I don't have. And Markdown is not in the dispatch, so I have to make it explicit. You can always write the explicit command as well. So I do that, and you can see at the bottom a program was written that's spring22.markdown. I'm going to open that program, just show where I am. Here is the Markdown program. Oops, it's a bit small. Here is the Markdown program. Now, this is not something you would want to read, but this Markdown, that's exactly the format that that GitHub, for example, likes very much. So, for example, if I go to GitHub and I wanted to export this file, then I would probably use the Markdown file. Now, in GitHub, I can also use the org file itself, so that's not really helpful. What is super helpful is if I want to work with Word, I can expand this to OpenOffice. So I can type Control-X, Control-E, the dispatcher opens, and then I use the key O, the first key, and then the export command for O is big O or small o. I'm going to use small o, and as you can see, the file has been created. If I go back to the directory, I can see here's the file, spring22.odt. Just going to prove to you that that actually works. So I don't think I have it here. Let me see, admin, spring22, where am I? Okay, that's where I am. And you see here's the file, the ODT file. It has the icon for open document, but I can open it. Here's the file. Actually, this didn't work at all for some reason, the export. I don't know why. But you can also see this is like OpenOffice, and I could save this as a PDF. That's the quickest way to create a PDF file. Or I can open it, export it, and save it as a Word file if I like. So I can save this as in many different formats. So why it didn't render and only this one line, I am not sure. It could be that the file itself is actually really very short. No, oh, I see. Yeah, it rendered. The answer is it only rendered the region. So for some reason, I moved into that region and it only rendered that. If I go to the same thing again, Ctrl-X-D-O-O, override it with another command and kill this one and go back and open it again, you should now see the entire file. No, that's still it. Oh, it couldn't do it because the file was open. So do it again. Once more, let's check the file is actually there. And new, yeah, it looks like it. And double click, there's the file. Yeah. So this is the Word version, for lack of a better term, of this entire file. Yeah. All the different headings. Now the headings here are opened. Word doesn't really have any way of hiding it. It's a really inferior format. And this is the file that I can now print as a PDF. I'm just going to print it as a PDF. I can save it as such. I'm going to put this in there and save it as a Spring 22 demo.pdf file. And if I go back to the Explorer, you can see here's the PDF. And it looks very PDF-y. This is the PDF. Looks just the same. Okay, I don't want that. And actually, I don't want to muck around with Word at all. Just sometimes this is needed. So it's useful for you maybe to know that you can do it. What's more interesting is HTML, because that's fast. And that's what I mostly use, for example, to create my printouts. So I type Ctrl+X, Ctrl+E, I get to the dispatcher, and I type H for export to HTML, and then simply O for open it, HO. And this opens a buffer, a browser in my other screen. I'm going to copy it over here. Here's the screen, and this is very nicely formatted. Yeah. What I don't have here is the image. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So this is the image that I inserted earlier. So it's the entire file for the script, and this is also the script I'm going to put later on GitHub. Right, so the last one important for scientific publications is Latex, or LaTeX, and this is a simplified version of the famous TeX formatting program. So I can again open my dispatcher, Ctrl+E, Ctrl+C, Ctrl+E, and then export to LaTeX is L, and then I type L again, and a TeX file is written, as you can see at the bottom. I'm going to go there, open the TeX file. It's at the very top. And I can open it, and here is the TeX file. This is particularly useful for mathematics and scientific publications that involve equations. But it has to be formatted. So I have to get a program that's called TeX to DVI, and then the DVI program can be printed. So it's not nearly as fast as the other possibilities. Anyway, that was some interesting ways in which you can render. So I'm trying to get back to my, I'm going to open the buffer list and have a look where I am. If I haven't opened it anymore, I think that's the problem. And there I am, back to my file. Oops. Okay, that's it pretty much for rendering. There's a lot more you can explore, but this is one of the most important ways in which I use Emacs when I want to publish documents.